And if you look at the President Graham Spanier and Vice President Gary Schultz and Athletic Director Tim Gurley and Head Coach Joe Paterno in this whole situation, and I believe they're just as morally culpable as Jerry Sandusky because they protected a child predator for at least 14 years. And not only that, they wanted to make sure that Jerry was treated humanely when there are child victims from a sexual predator. This really upsets me.
Mark May, an ESPN commentator, former player himself, in fact, Hall of Fame college lineman, I think, at Pitt. You know, there's a lot of debate about what kind of punishment ought to be meted out to Penn State right now. And, you know, one of the questions is, you see that statue every day. To get into the actual stadium, they're going to go buy it. There's the name on the library, and the Paternos were celebrated. Both Joe Paterno and his wife were given more than $3 million to the actual library. Will their name stand? And we've seen, you know, Phil Knight, a big booster of not only Penn State, but a big defender of Joe Paterno, even at his funeral service. He took the name off of a child care center at the Nike headquarters in Oregon. I just can't imagine walking into a stadium with what we just saw and seeing a big picture of Joe Paterno, a big statue of Joe Paterno, or walk into a library. Is it inevitable this name comes down? I know Bobby Bowden, who knew him real well, coach of Florida State, who was #2 all-time in wins, said it's got to come down. Do you agree with him?
I don't agree. I think it still stands there. I think there's, you know, it's people make mistakes. Obviously, this is a big mistake. But I think what Joe Paterno has done for Penn State and the school and outside has to carry some weight, something there. I just think that
there's that line though. Like, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? It's listen. Again, he was always the guy who did it right. But again, if it's our kid. We send our kid to Jerry Sandusky for some camp, and he's raped, and we find out that Paterno knew this guy was a creep, and they were worried about the reputation of the school, and to treat humanely Jerry Sandusky with a benefit package, and my kid's raped, he's lucky that he makes it to jail, and you do the same thing. How can we separate the good part from the bad part? Overall, you don't get a statue for enabling a child rapist. No, and I'm not jumping you on this.
You get a statue for 40 years of running a football program and for lifting up the reputation of an entire university. Yes, it's besmirched now, but you know, I have a beef with what Mark May said as we walked into this. It's not equivalent. It's not, what Paterno did is not the same thing as what Sandusky did. He didn't rape the kids. He had a horrible mistake in terms of the way he protected Sandusky and in the way he tried to protect the reputation of the program, and that's a terrible error. But I don't think that erases every good thing that he's done for the campus or everything that he's done.
You don't deserve to be lionized. I'm sorry. Would any one of us, and I know it's easy to say right now, even if you didn't have the guts to tackle the guy raping a kid, and I'd like to think we all would try at least, you wouldn't go say something to a cop the next day? You'd see this guy on campus after what he did and not say a word? And you'd you know, send him off at a retirement party? Come on. We know none of us would do that. This isn't a gray area.
Richard, it's very easy to speculate and say what we would do.
I'm not talking about being a tough guy. I'm talking about standing up and saying, a kid's raped. I'd like to think none of us would just say, well, you know, the athletic director didn't do anything about it. And we also know, by the way, he apparently had conversations not to go to the authorities here. We have email trails saying Joe Paterno said, don't go public with this. Let's handle it with him directly. Didn't even check if the kid was dead or alive. That's obviously enough of a mistake. You don't get a statue.
Obviously, the safety of the child is very important. But would you risk your entire career?
Absolutely.
And would you risk it if it was your brother who was accused of doing something horrible, or if it was somebody?
He fired the guy in '98.
If it was somebody who's close to you.
You know, I feel differently if I don't know the person, and if I do know the person. One, I would tend to want to help that person. The circumstances, obviously, I don't put up with as far as sexual child abuse. I agree with you there. I'm not saying that, but in that instance of the history that's been with that person, like he said, a brother, I don't want to say you want to protect the guy, but you actions definitely should have been different than what they've
He
been
didn't
taking.
have to wrestle him. All he had to do was pick up the phone and say, kid got raped in the shower. I don't know if he's dead or alive. Somebody ought to check it out. Hey, guys, this isn't, I don't care if he was your best friend for 30 years, your brother or whatever. And it wasn't his brother, by the way, because he was putting, first of all, clearly through 400 pages, if you read the report, the reputation and publicity of the school was priority one, not the well-being of Jerry Sandusky, the guy who was already put out the pasture in '99. He wrote in the margins concerns of liability for the school. He further talked the AD, the president of the school, and the senior VP business relations. Don't change your mind, guys. We were going to go to the authorities. Let's not now.
I'm not defending what Joe Paterno did. Nobody
But
at this
you're
table
saying he
is.
still deserves to be lionized. I can tell you more about Joe Paterno probably at this table than anybody but him. And I thought he was a great coach. But that's past tense. Kids got raped, and he didn't do anything.
Are we talking about a football?
You can't separate the two, can you?
Well, I think you can, yeah. I don't
You
think
have
this
to.
You
How
have
do you
to. I
mean
don't
you
think this
have to?
has anything to do with the football program.
Well, the football
I don't think this has
program
anything.
was
There's key people involved, and there's a head coach
Time
that's
out,
involved.
Gerald. You
but
know
there's
this
a
better than me.
university.
If the women's water gymnastics team had a coach that did this, do you think the president, athletic director, and the senior VP would have handled this the same way instead of Joe Pa?
That women's team coach didn't put Penn State on the map. They didn't establish the reputation
So
that
you're
Penn
answering
State
my
had.
question that they wouldn't.
No, there is
Of course,
definitely a
of
double
course it'd be
They're gonna
dealt
handle
with
it differently.
It'd be dealt with differently. There's no doubt about it. It'd be dealt with differently. But we are talking about Joe Paterno. And I mean, I'm not saying that it's right, Richard. If it was my child, I would want to, I'm not going to say I'd want to murder someone on television, but close to it if it was my child. But you have to separate the football program. You have an entire.
What does that mean?
What that means is that, frankly, money and an entire community that deals on that program. And young men like him that are coming into Penn State, they didn't do anything. They
I'm not
come and
putting
play
this on
football.
Gerald. I'm
No,
not putting this on
I'm
anybody
talking-
that
right.
wore a uniform at the school.
Right.
I'm not
Right.
putting this on any of the other coaches because apparently Paterno didn't share a word of it with any of the other coaches at all. Okay? So this is strictly on 4 guys right now. And seemingly it's some other adults, but let's just stick with those 4 guys. My problem is the 4 guys were the head coach who was the program, the athletic director who Paterno reported to only in name only,
That's
the
at every
president
school.
of the school.
That's at
They
every
never
school.
even told the board.
Of course not.
So are you saying that this school basically, that because it was football, he shouldn't have done more than he did?
But Richard, all I'm trying to say to you is that this happens on campuses
Not
every
this.
every
There's
year.
never been a case like
It's
this.
often, and this doesn't make it right. It's often a young lady that's 18 years old that's allegedly raped, and the coach is informed, and they try not to involve law enforcement because it's the star basketball player.
Nobody's saying that what Paterno did was okay. Nobody's saying that he shouldn't have done more, that he should have gotten involved and stopped the thing. I think we can, we all agree. We all agree about that. But
Because you called for the death penalty last night.
I did, and I still agree. But do you wash away the legacy that he has? And granted, you know what? Maybe there's a positive element in having his statue outside the football stadium as a reminder that not only did he do a lot of good for the school, but he allowed something incredibly horrible to happen at the school.
Last
and maybe
question,
that,
Andrew.
Yeah.
We all say the victims come first, right? In this thing?
Yes.
Okay. You're a victim's family right now. You go to the stadium. Do you want to walk by basically the guy that aided or abetted this guy
You know,
and raped your kid?
I'm probably not going to a Penn State game at all.
And I'm probably more concerned with the civil settlement that I'm going to receive.